Welcome back, all of you, ladies and gentlemen. As you will see from the program, this particular session deals with sustainability or sustainable development, and in particular, institutional policy and practice. So what this session will look at is basically how institutions can promote sustainable development or sustainability, which is part of the social responsibility of any institution, through the various institutions by looking at the practices, at the policies that the institutions put forward to promote sustainability. And to do this, we have a very distinguished panel this afternoon from all over the world, from Malaysia to Mexico, from United States to Pakistan. So really we cover almost the whole world. And what I propose to do is to introduce, and the other interesting aspect is they cover both public and private institutions, as you will see when I make the introduction. I'll introduce each speaker just before the speaker speaks, who will have about 20 minutes. And then after the speakers have finished their presentation, then we will open up the discussion in the forum. Okay, so let me start with the first speaker, who's Zulkifli Abdulrazak on my left. And he is the Vice Chancellor of Al-Bukhari International University, which is a private institution. Formerly, he was for about 11 years the Vice Chancellor of the well-known University of Science, Malaysia. And he's also currently the President of the IAU. His background is health, in particular pharmacy. I'm not going to read the full bio. You can see it in your program. At the back of the program, you will see each speaker has got a full CV and biodata. And he is going to talk about, well, walking the talk. Right, Zul, carry on.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, a greeting of peace and a very good afternoon. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking the Ministry of Higher Education of Saudi Arabia, and particularly Dr. Salim Al-Malik, for making it possible for me to be here and enjoy your generosity. I've been given a title on the sustainability, institutional practice and policy and practice on a sub-theme of walking the talk. And this is probably a practical sessions of how we get our institution to be into the mode of sustainability. Let me start by trying to understand what sustainability is all about. And it's a very vague sort of a concept that many people are not able to grasp it, and therefore implementing it will be a problem. But there is one common sort of understanding of what sustainability is all about, coming from the Brundtland report of 1987, that says it is supposed to be a development model that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So in other words, we are talking about how much we can conserve, how much we can preserve the things that we're enjoying today, so that our future generation will also be able to enjoy it the way we have done it today. But there is another definition which I kind of like, which also talks about the quality of life, the quality of human life. Because very often when we talk about sustainability, we sometimes run into a problem of trying to focus, and we sometimes focus more on the environment rather than the human person themselves. So here it talks about the quality of life and how this quality of life could be met by us living in kind of a shared way with the ecosystem that we are in. And this is another definition which is not quite popular, but comes from a group of scientists that also recognizes sustainability is a concept that we need to contend with. But I want to go back to what Raja said this morning, that sustainability itself is not a post-Brundtland new concept. It is a concept that has been existing in many traditional societies. There is a way of life, in fact. Sustainability is a way of life. The way we breathe it, the way we practice it, the kind of food we eat, and the way we dress, and all those other practices that makes life sustainable and in a very, very balanced way. So it is not new in a sense, it is not a curricular thing in a way, it is very much of how we practice it. And I think for those of us who believe in Islam, I think basically it is very much an Islamic concept, because it talks about moderation, it talks about balance, it talks about the environment and how we interact between people and environment. So it is in a way, to me, a concept which is very holistic, that we need to try and grasp it and use it for practical purposes. It is about now, how do we shift into a kind of a mode where we are now, I would believe, in a kind of an unsustainable way of living into a sustainable way of living. And therefore, the way to do it is to go into a policy shift that now looks at various things that is happening today, things that we plan for here and now, not thinking about the future generation, as the definition says. We are very much consumerists, buying things sometimes that we don't need, sometimes that we over sort of stock things that we don't need, yeah? And the whole gamut and the whole practices of how we waste things, beginning from food to whatever else that we possess and consume. Yeah? It is not about maintaining the status quo, it's about changing the status quo. It is about non-incremental change and all those things that we see what today is all about. But how do we change our mindset into another sort of a dimension, moving into a future-oriented sort of planning and looking at things in a very long, forward-looking things, to conserve, yeah, and rather to waste, not just to reuse, reduce, or recycle, but also to begin with whether we need it or not. We should refuse it in the first place. Some policies in my university, for example, when we buy things, we say, you don't bring the plastics with us because we don't need the plastic. You can keep and dispose this plastic, don't bring it to the university so that it doesn't become a burden on the university trying to dispose this plastic. So there are things that we refuse right from the beginning so that we don't get into other issues at the same time. So it's about challenging the status quo. It is about a transformation of the mindset, of the kind of practices that we do, and it is a transformation that takes a long time because sometimes it has to do with habits, and some habits die hard. It is not about individual, it's about the community, how the community and the general population could benefit rather than just individual alone. It is not just about learning the way we understand it, but there's also some elements of unlearning, because some of the bad habits that needs to be unlearned, and we need to relearn some of the habits that perhaps what our grandmother used to say, according to Rajesh this morning. So there are many things I think that needs to be looked at in terms of a policy shift that will fit into the definition of sustainability. What are the three basic policy goals if you want to look at this kind of a transformation of a policy shift that impacts on the mind eventually? I will list three. One is how to facilitate the shift. Second is how to enhance it. And third is how do we sustain this particular shift. Unless and until this shift takes place and we are able to sustain it, then sustainability will just become a jargon, another word that we use in many of these forums and discussions, and even our own classroom. So as far as the practice is concerned, when we have quite, ready to go into a policy shift, we would like to look at, first of all, to me, it's a kind of leadership that we want to bring. Many examples that I've seen, it is about the leadership taking charge. It's about the leadership determining which direction to go in terms of the transformation. Unless the leadership believes that this can be done, then it's probably be difficult to do. And the other point that I think that needs to be stressed is that there is a lot of risk-taking, because in the kind of transformation you do, sometimes there's a lot of trial and error. And there's no one model that fits all, in the sense that we do not take one model from even one institution to transpose it on yours, because the context is different, sometimes the values is different, sometimes the mission is also different. So you really need to readjust and find out what is workable for you, and this probably takes time, and some of the risk-taking is what many leaders do not want to get involved in. On top of that, it is not a one-man game, it is a whole gamut of people involved. And therefore, you need to kind of capacity build so that everybody gets involved and know what the changes is all about, beginning from students right down to staff. In my experience, we work with the students first, because the students is easy to change. They have not formed a kind of a mindset, and they are the one who actually takes this on, and then the lecturers and the academic staff comes in second. Yeah? So it has to be across the board. It is not a one-man game, it is a teamwork. The more teams you've got that think about this problem through, the better it is for you. It is competency-based, it is about creating a new mindset of what sustainability is all about. Secondly, it's about taking ownership. We've talked about this morning. You need to own it, you need to learn it by doing. We have mentioned it again this morning, and this is where walking the talk is very, very important. Particularly for the leaders, particularly for those who promote and advocate this. This is one area that I think that needs to be done. You need to translate many of the things that you learn in classroom into practice so that it is seen. as something which is actually viable, not just something which is theoretical on paper. You have to be consistent, and it also has to be participative in the sense that people will see and benefit from what has been done. And the last point, I think, in terms of enhancing is about learning and again trying to adapt it to the kind of environment you are in. The context is important, and therefore there must be a flexibility in trying to implement sustainability and practice it. I've mentioned it earlier, you cannot transpose one model over the other because the context virtually is different. You need to adapt, you need to co-create with the environments that you are in and the people you are working with, and important to me it is how relevant it is. You cannot do something which is successful somewhere else, but it is not relevant to you in this particular context. Yeah? The whole issue of trying to evaluate and monitor is also very important. And in this particular context, I'm not talking about ranking, I'm not talking about rating, I'm talking about how do we develop this as a kind of an experience that everybody can share and learn from. It is a developmental model, it is not a punitive model, so that everybody can be incentivized in trying to learn and also adopt this particular system. So in sustaining it, therefore, we need to talk about incentives, we need to talk about recognition, we need to talk about rewards. Yeah? And often, I think the difficulty from my point of view is how do we incentivize the intangibles? The question of ethics, the question of morality, the question of integrity, the question of leadership, the question of teamwork. All these, I think, cannot be quote-unquote measured the way we measure things economically or otherwise. So there is another way of looking at it. In our university, we have developed what we call a competency-based framework, where some of these intangibles now can be sort of measured in the particular context that we are working through. Yeah? And therefore, it has to be consultative, because in the sense that the people in the science and the people in the arts measure and look at things differently. So you cannot use the measure that you use for this arts and the science as in the same way, because it do not sort of has the same baseline, as it were. Again, the whole question of how to measure and monitor is something that is also very important as far as trying to sustain it. Yeah? In this particular effort, I think this United Nations universities and another 11 universities in Asia Pacific is trying to remodel what we call the AUA, which is the Alternative University Appraisal System that works on a developmental model. It is recognizing that different universities have got different strengths, and how do you work on this strength so that you can learn from one another to build a more sustainable environment and a sustainable institutions, as it were. Once that is done, I think then we can look at a total sort of institutional sort of practice as far as sustainability is concerned. To me, if once you have successfully built a mindset, yeah, then you can look forward into a kind of enhanced social responsibility role of the university, or social engagement, depending on how you look at it. And finally, I think what is important in all this thing, how do we shift the paradigm of excellence, rather than the way we look at it in a very reductionist thing and measuring it in a very sort of a cursory thing. How do we actually holistically measure this excellence, taking a very holistic role in this particular aspect? And that is, I think, what sustainability is all about, and I think we want to actually move into a kind of a paradigm that imbibes into sustainability as a way of life, as a way of learning, and also as a way of interacting between one another. Yeah? Lastly, in the next few minutes, let me talk about my university, which is a new university called the Al-Bukhari International University. This is a pro-poor university. We only enroll people who are below the poverty line. 80% of the students are international students, 20% are from Malaysia. And this whole idea of sustainability is part and parcel of the university's mission, because we understand 80% of the students who are coming from poor environment will need to be sustainable when they go back. And therefore, the mission of creating a sustainability mindset within the student is something that is very, very important. As you can see there, we have a heart, kind of a symbol. We say education with the heart, because it's just not about the mindset. It's also about the heart set. It's also about the qalbu in a way. And how these two interact, so that these other intangibles that we talk about become a real monitor, a real compass in the individual itself, although sometimes we cannot measure them. And this is a kind of awakening, I think, that we want to bring within the university and the environment that we have within the university. Last but not least, just to show you some features of the university, the hostels, the one below is basically the library, and also the labs and the institutions for learning and lectures. Yeah? On that note, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Zul. You've done wonderfully well in almost plenty of time still left. But let me summarize the key messages that I got from your intervention. One is that to bring about change in any institution, you need to involve all the stakeholders. It cannot just be done from the top. And as you said, you believe in involving the students first and the rest as well, provided you've got good leadership. I think it's an important point. Change cannot be brought about just by somebody deciding, let's change. It has to involve the whole institution. The second point is, I think, measuring the intangibles. That's not easy, and I'm sure many institutions have grappled with the way of how do you carry out the measurements. And I think this is a way where perhaps those institutions who've done it and have successfully done it can perhaps share the experiences with the other. What I particularly liked at the end of your talk is when you said that education is not just changing a mindset, it is also changing a heart set. Education comes from the heart, not just from the mind. Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Right, we next have from Mexico, Antonio de Asad, who is currently the president of University of Mونتيري in Mexico, a private university, by the way. His field is industrial engineering, and before he came to the University of Mونتيري, he has worked for many years at different levels at another institution bearing a similar name, Technology Mونتيري. I think I know it as Tech Mونتيري or something like this, and another well-known Mexican university as well. And he is going to talk about strategic pillars for organizational sustainability. Antonio?
Thank you. I'm going to show you a short video for the context where we are at the University of Mونتيري. They can show you that.
The Universidad de Mونتيري is located at the state of Nuevo León, Mexico, and was born in 1969 thanks to the efforts and will of 5 religious congregations: Mary's Brothers, Lasallian Brothers, Daughters of Mary Immaculate of Guadalupe, Nuns of the Sacred Heart, and Sisters of the Incarnate Word, as well as a group of distinguished entrepreneurs who developed an innovative educational project focused on the promotion of life and dignity of the person. Its mission is to comprehensively educate the student through a personalized educational model and an intercultural environment of academic excellence, so that he/she can fully develop in the different fields of his/her life and find transcendence in serving others, thus contributing to the development of knowledge and the construction of a sustainable society. Today, the UDEM has an educational offering that includes 4 high school programs, 39 bachelor degree programs in health, education, humanities, engineering, technologies, social sciences, law, art, architecture, design and business, 10 master programs, 8 postgraduate specialties, 35 medical specialties, 173 continuing education programs, 16 research centers, 11,621 students, 34,801 former students. Among the distinctive elements of the UDEM, the following stand out. 1. An educational model focused on the student. 2. Encourage a working liaison. There are more than 1,370 options for professional practice. 3. Development of global vision. More than 700 exchange options in 61 countries. 4. Applied investigation. More than 400 projects of final assessment for companies developed each year. 5. Education for leadership and integrity. 6. Our firm principles encourage the integral education of our students. Man is the origin, center, and end of culture understood as a process of humanization. The university is open to man and culture. Man can only fulfill himself when he is at the service of man.
I have a responsibility with students, parents, and the community. UDEM has a responsibility. Anyone who ever studied, taught, or worked at UDEM and is willing to discuss our institutional responsibility in terms of sustainable development will be advised to use the word service and belief. Policies and practices in sustainable development are part of our start and our history as an institution. Everyone who is part of UDEM community quickly learns the humanistic principles of our university and our explicit commitment to service. According to the OECD, Mexico has made a tremendous progress over the last decade in terms of improving the quality of life of the citizens, especially in the areas of education, health, and job creation. The average person earns in Mexico $11,106. 35% of adults aged between 25 and 64 years old have earned the equivalent of a high school degree. As of 2012, the percentage of higher education coverage in the country was 30%. Educational institutions such as universities, UDEM is one of them, in Mexico, are committed to increase that percentage. President Enrique Peña Nieto is sweeping education reforms and signing them into law. Last February, Mr. Peña Nieto officially made the commitment of his office and his team to strengthen the education system in our country. His and our goal as committed and socially responsible institutions is to develop human capital through education, which will result in higher living standards and prosperous nation. The higher education coverage goal for this administration of the government is 40%. In the last decade, Mexico has taken major steps to strengthen its environmental policy and institutional framework. For example, good progress has been made in the reinforcement measures to control air pollution from mobile sources and by introducing proactive policies on nature conservation and biodiversity. However, Mexico needs to integrate environmental concerns more deeply into national and social sectoral policies in order to move towards sustainable growth. UDEM, with its dedicated staff, strives to incorporate the principles of sustainability across all of our systems, from operations to academia, and to lead by hastening the implementation of sustainable resolutions in our communities and the global context, which is there to be there with us. By engaging the campus as a living laboratory for sustainability, students are actively, every day engaged in the ecological, social, and economic settings. This way, not only our students, but also our faculty and administrative staff are part of enhancing their UDEM experience and the leadership potential. To support our policies and walk the talk, UDEM has continuously been implementing projects in 3 interdependent areas: environmental, social, and economic. To boost this work, UDEM has adopted comprehensive measures in collaborative efforts between our academia and social service projects. We are committed to help in accomplishing the United Nations Millennium Development Goals and call upon to act on President Peña Nieto's agenda. Today, I will present sample projects in which UDEM has duly worked in the three interdependent areas, starting by giving you a quick overview of our environmental practices and following the presentation of our social and economic projects. In 2010, upon the recommendation of UDEM executive directors and our executive board, UDEM decided to establish the Center for Sustainability, SOS. This way, our environmental efforts were centralized and unified to our principles and policies. Our UDEM high school system has a part of their curriculum a course called Environmental Systems. Also, our eco-minded Vallalto unit, which opened its doors in 2004, has a dedication of being strongly environmentally oriented. During the same year, a green committee has been formed and installed the first recycling bins at our university. In 2005, the pastoral group joined UDEM high schools and its efforts on promoting on-campus green activities and practices. UDEM undersigned the Earth Charter Initiative in 2006 and in 2008, the student group IECHE and our maintenance department joined the launch of a on-campus trash sorting project. Currently, UDEM is working with other groups to educate low-income population in topics related to environmental sustainability. In 2012, we became the first Mexican educational institution reporting under the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education Diagnostics. Our policies and actions are standardized under this methodology. There is an initiative to develop a plan for green footprint estimate, and we are continuously working on the solid waste sorting and management at every facility in our campus. Research in solar energy and lab garden is being made as well. In addition to all this, we are lending support to rural underprivileged communities in Mexico through them Mexican missionary groups. Communities are trained in the following topics: family vegetable gardens and business projects through architecture, industrial design, mechanical engineering, and social entrepreneurship. Our university is very well aware that our agenda must include policies and practices that promote the eradication of widespread conditions of poverty, unemployment, and inequitable social conditions. It is our institutional responsibility to educate individuals that ensure the well-being of the human person by sustainable practices. Through our 6 initiatives, special attention is given to ensure equitable treatment to women, children, people of indigenous cultures, people with disabilities, and all members of populations considered the most vulnerable in society. UDEM also offers a technical degrees in the Preparatoria Politécnica, which is a technical high school for low-income individuals that are coming to these facilities from low-income families, and the current local government and industry in the region is expressed its support and is giving their support for financial assistance to increase the number of enrolled students. UDEM provides about 90 college students who serve as teachers in the volunteer program that we have for that particular facility. About 70% of the faculty are students from our undergraduate programs. One of our projects with the purpose of nurture economic development and social empowerment is called Kimakul, which means with happiness from the heart in the Mayan culture. It is a micro business supported by UDEM, which main function is to assist producers with low income to generate Mexican handcrafted products, regional candy, and other products to the community. Kimakul products are produced under the fair trade system. About 107 of our students participate in social professional practice in this micro enterprise. UDEM also has opportunities for adults who are leaders at their low-income communities. Through Universidad de Barrios, adults receive education over the weekends and are being trained in various topics such as project management, business administration, ethics, values, and leadership. There are more people than students that participate in this particular project, people from our faculty, from our collaborators, staffs, and students. And the courses are developed in our main campus facilities. Our vision is very comprehensive, and while healthcare in Mexico has faced a real challenge during the last decades, UDEM has developed a health and development center called CESADE. Over 28 years, it has offered medical, psychological, educational, and recreational services at our recovery costs for the community. About 35 our medical students and nursing school students are part of these efforts. Young generations are the most vulnerable to poverty along with women and children. This is how UDEM implemented the Youth Camp Factor 360 degrees, in which the main goal is to help teenagers and young adults recognize their talents and take the advantage of them by designing their personal development plans. Our UDEM students participate in facilitating these workshops as well. UDEM is well known in the community for facilitating programs with students that serve as volunteers, tutors, coaches, and spiritual guides. Our assistance is not only reserved to activities at our campus, but also at orphanages and retirement homes. Our commitment is quickly spreading across the region, and as a result of this, we have also started to spread our missionary groups to South Africa and South America, and to Africa and South America. We have been awarded with a Silver NASPA Excellence Award every year from 2008 through 2011 as the international best practice. At UDEM, we seek that every student learns that we all have the talents and responsibility to build a better world, and that whoever decides to take on the journey ends up finding that service their own transcendence. In our Vision 2020, where we explicitly commit UDEM's policies and practice as interdependent and linked to the environmental, social, and economic sustainability, we really state that in all of our Vision 2020. As an educational institution, we are privileged to share our knowledge through service. I encourage you to take a deep look to our social responsible model, in which we are proudly serving others not only through education, but also through our practices across sectors. I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity and space to share a small portion of our universe, in which we really clearly believe that service should be demonstrated from, to, and for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for this excellent presentation. And UDEM, your institution, is well known internationally as a campus which has really succeeded in what they call greening itself. It's often quoted in many literature as University of Mونتيري in Mexico is an example of how successfully it has greened its campus. I think the amazing thing is how you use your students. Very often we forget the resources that our students are in institutions. They do form probably the strongest resource that any institution can have. And I think particularly interesting was that you use your students as teachers. Teaching is a major, finding appropriate teachers is a major issue in many countries in the world, especially in Africa. And the way you've managed to get your undergraduate students while they're studying to assist in the teaching, I think is an example that perhaps many countries can follow. Thank you again for this very interesting presentation. Right, we move to the next one, which is Joseph Aluto, who is currently the Executive Vice President and Provost of Ohio State University, a public university, of course. And his academic field is business administration and management. And his presentation is entitled The Global Commitment. Joseph?
Thank you. I'm especially appreciative of the work of Salima Malik in organizing this 4th International Conference, as it gives an opportunity to bring together universities from quite literally all over the world, and universities of very different size and very different purpose. If I could summarize what I'd like to say today, it's really in 3 points. The first is that sustainability as a commitment, if it's to be successful at most universities, has to really be distributed across the major 3 functions of universities. That is, research, or the creation of knowledge. Secondly, of course, teaching, or the dissemination of knowledge. And then third, of course, engagement with the community, which is really the effort to try to bring that knowledge, that dissemination of knowledge, to the solving of practical problems. The second objective of really what I want to say is to talk about the importance of having sustainability aligned with the institutional mission that is driven by the university, and that sustainability and a commitment to sustainability will not be viable if it is simply a reaction to environmental pressure to focus on that issue. And then the third thing I would like to stress is that universities have an opportunity that very few other organizations have, in that they really are natural test beds for sustainability issues. If you think about it, universities have both the scale, that is the size of operation, but they also have the depth of operation. They have the time to really do assessments of sustainability ideas, the effectiveness of those ideas. And it's that unique combination of scale and depth that allows universities to really demonstrate and assess effectiveness, and thereby integrating all of that with their teaching, research, and engagement missions. Of course, the way one approaches sustainability really depends on the nature of the institution, the institutional context. So let me briefly tell you about Ohio State. We're a university of 65,000 students, a little over 3,000 faculty, and about 20,000 staff. We have 55,000 students on one campus, the main campus, and another 10,000 students that are distributed over 4 additional campuses. Our operating budget in a given year is about $5.5 billion US, and only 8 to 10% of that comes from the state of Ohio. The rest of it we earn through a variety of different operations. We have the second largest amount of corporate funded research in the United States, and we do over $700 million each year in funded research activities. So we're large, and as a result, we have to attract and address problems in slightly different ways. For us, creating a structure within which initiatives can take place is very important. So for us, we really spur and guide sustainability initiatives across the university in a variety of structural ways. What we've done to begin with is to establish essentially a structure of 3 organizations. There's a President and Provost Council on Sustainability, and that's designed to involve leaders at all levels of the university. But most important, it starts with the President and the Provost, for that creates a campus culture that embraces sustainability, communicates its benefits, and then rewards innovation. In order to complement the work of the Council on Sustainability, we've created an Office of Energy and Environment. It's a university-wide forum for sustainability efforts in teaching, research, outreach, and engagement. And to provide leadership to that office, we've also created a post of Vice President and Enterprise Executive for Energy and the Environment. That individual serves as the university's Chief Sustainability Officer. The office supports faculty who are researching energy options and developing alternatives to fossil fuels. It creates forums for student interactions on environmental issues, and also advises on government policies for energy and environmental research. And then finally, we have an Office of Energy Services and Sustainability, for it's our university's primary advocate for achieving sustainability in all areas of university operations. It's that last phrase, operations, that's important, because that includes resource use and energy management. As just one example, that office works with building designers, facility managers, and university customers to conserve energy and to reduce operating costs. Now, up to now, I've just talked about a structure within which we can have a focus on sustainability, but let me talk a little bit about outcomes. So what's happened after we've made those commitments? Let me give you just a series of examples of how we have enacted a commitment to sustainability. Well, to begin with, we developed a field of 458 geothermal wells on our campus, and those wells will reduce heating and cooling energy costs in 20% of our student residence facilities. And the design of those wells, the development of that field, It was all done with student involvement, in a sense, creating a living learning laboratory on campus for our students. We're also taking steps to power the Ohio State campus by using energy from an Ohio wind farm. We made a 20-year purchase of wind energy capacity that equals 25% of the Columbus campus electrical load. It is the single largest purchase of renewable energy by any university in the United States. That major step toward becoming a carbon neutral university helps us plan for the future as we anticipate the cost of electricity increasing over the next 20 years. The university has contracted to install some $7 million in energy efficiency and conservation infrastructure upgrades in 5 test campus buildings. That project is expected to reduce utility bills by more than 18%. The university has invested some $2 million over the last 3 years to connect the Ohio State campus to the City of Columbus bicycle infrastructure system and to construct new bicycle facilities and parking. You'd have to know a little bit about the Columbus area to realize that having bicycles rather than cars really is a major plus in developing a sustainable environment. Our efforts to produce a more bicycle-friendly campus have earned us the designation as a bicycle-friendly university, one of just 26 in the United States and the only one in Ohio. Our campus area bus service, car sharing, and car and van pooling are integrated in a sustainable transportation and parking strategy. Student fees cover a bus pass for unlimited access to local mass transit, reducing their reliance on automobiles. Anti-idling guidelines have been adopted by the university, and our on-site fueling station dispenses only soy biodiesel fuel. Last fall, Ohio State set a new standard for collegiate stadium recycling. Our Ohio Stadium is the largest athletic facility in the country to have achieved zero waste. That means that we have diverted over 90% of the materials from landfills and recycling and composting. I might mention that Ohio Stadium holds just over 105,000 spectators. And that means that in order to reach that goal of zero waste, we have to have the commitment, the effort, and the attention on the part of countless collaborators, including all of our football fans. To reduce water usage, our campus landscaping includes plant materials that require minimum maintenance. And through rainfall monitoring, we've been able to reduce the need for irrigation by 20%. The Office of Student Life has appointed student sustainability chairs in our student residence halls. They implement energy and resource conservation initiatives in campus living environments, and they spread the word about the importance of sustainability and the importance of student involvement in that simply as a part of a lifelong commitment. We've also posted an energy dashboard that contains real-time energy usage for campus buildings so that the campus community can view Ohio State as its metered utility information is displayed in what we believe, and students, faculty, and staff tell us, is a very transparent fashion. So in addition to this evidence of operational progress, Ohio State is also promoting sustainability literacy in its curricular and co-curricular opportunities, and indeed, sustainability is woven throughout the Ohio State curriculum, from atmospheric studies to zoology, from biochemistry to wastewater management, from civil engineering to vehicle design, developmental economics to electrical engineering, and in more than 90 areas of individual study. One of our most recent examples is a new interdisciplinary undergraduate major which emphasizes the human dimensions of sustainability, many of whom you've already heard. In addition, we have a waterman agriculture and natural resources laboratory that has been transferred into a test bed for best management practices for water quality protection and farming sustainability. It showcases environmental stewardship for students, for faculty, and for urban residents, and provides hands-on examples of how to protect water resources. We're currently involved in projects in 7 cities to have urban areas reconformed and reconfigured to sustain farming activities. And let me close here with just one final example of sustainability effort that we at Ohio State are particularly proud of. The Buckeye Bullet, which is built by our students, is the fastest electric car in the world. It's been clocked at over 300 miles an hour, and it's aiming for a speed of over 400 miles an hour. Now, speed and distance travel will determine ultimately the viability of electric vehicles of the future. And it's a classic example of how we take the issue of sustainability and wrap it around faculty research, student teaching, and ultimately our engagement with the public. So I hope these examples demonstrate a little bit about how we walk the talk and how we function when we think about sustainability. In effect, we're trying to inspire generations of global citizens by integrating environmental responsibility into the intellectual and the social fabric of our campus. Accordingly and appropriately, our institutional priorities are driving our sustainability efforts forward, and they involve, as I will say again, the discovery of new knowledge, the dissemination of that knowledge, and then ultimately the use of that knowledge in a broader society. And really, in a very real sense, that's my primary message to you today. Sustainability must be at the heart of an institution's priority, whether that's curricular, whether that's research, whether that's operational, or simply cultural. Sustainability cannot be seen as an imperative that's imposed by external forces to the university. Sustainability must not be simply a trendy add-on to other more seemingly important institutional activities. Sustainability, to be effective, is truly among the vital issues of our time, and I'm particularly confident that the Ohio State community will help meet this grand challenge of the 21st century in ways that benefit our campus, but more importantly, help us to benefit the world. And that is really the essence of social responsibility for a university. I certainly have confidence that we'll continue this effort in the future, and I certainly hope that each of you will make a similar commitment for your institutions. So thank you very much for my time.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for this very, very interesting presentation. You clearly have some remarkable and impressive initiatives taken by the Ohio State University. I think clearly you're not just preaching sustainability, you're practicing it and using technology, up-to-date technology, to put into practice. I think that's extremely interesting. 2 points you made, I think, also interesting. One is to make sure that sustainable development forms part of the institution's mission and policy, perhaps integrated within its strategic plan. It's only then can you move the whole thing forward. And secondly, I was interested to see the structure that you've created, a proper structure within the Provost's office to promote sustainable development. And your last point is extremely interesting, to embed sustainable development and sustainability in everything that the university does, and not just to regard it as an attachment to the institution. Thank you very much for this very, very interesting presentation. Right. Our last speaker is Adil Najam from Pakistan. He is the Vice Chancellor of Lahore University of Management Sciences, often referred to as LUMS, and it's a private university. And before joining LUMS, he was professor at Boston University for several years. And in fact, from his bio, you will see, he remains a professor of international relations and geography and the environment. He has expertise in many fields, but in recent years, his work has focused on global climate change and sustainable development. His presentation is entitled Social Responsibility for a Private University in a Developing Country.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. I walked up here earlier because I needed to switch the computer, not for any other reason, but it's a great pleasure to be here. My thanks to the Ministry of Higher Education, to Dr. Salim, to colleagues for this opportunity. It is a pleasure to be here, and it's been a very thoughtful 2 days. A lot of questions. One of the benefits of being late in submitting your presentation, Tandon Saab, is that you can change it later. So I've done that, which means that unfortunately there isn't an Arabic translation of this, but there'll be very few words, and my apologies for that omission. I want to start by 3 questions. Well, before that, I should say the previous 3 presentations have been just this marvelous array of ideas and actual actions in what sustainability in particular, social responsibility in general meets at universities of various kinds. Coming after Joe from Ohio, I should add, he said, we are a big university. Let me say, we are a small university. We are just about as small. But this is very indicative, as you will see, because many of the issues become the same, even as the scale becomes very different. I want to start by raising 3 questions. I promise not to answer any of them, because if I did, then there wouldn't be much left to talk about. But these are questions that have also come up again and again during the last 2 days, and I think are important. The first is, does sustainability within and beyond the campus, and you saw this in the previous presentations too, sustainability within this ecosystem, the test bed as you called it, does sustainability within and beyond the campus pose new challenges for universities? And also, does it pose new opportunities? I think the answer to both is yes, but we'll talk about that. The second is really, and I should thank Philip Alpbach, like always, to poignantly zone in on this issue, which is how should we be conceptualizing the social responsibility of the university? It is everything, and if it is everything, then it may be nothing. And if it is something, then having a clearer idea might be useful. But I've added that little mischievous note at the end that should we be doing it? Because part of me thinks that we should certainly try to understand it better, but not get so lost in understanding it that we don't do the steps that we could be doing right now. But again, I'll come back to this in a minute, but I think it's an important question for all of us to think about. And the third is that should social responsibility be contextualized? And if so, how much and how? And this is, again, very prevalent in all these three presentations, that it is really the context of the university. And by context, it's not just what country it is in. It is more than, context is more than country, context is also specific university type, and so on and so forth. I'm going to talk about the three questions in a slightly different order because it makes more sense, but those are the three things that I want to do in my remaining few minutes. The idea of university social responsibility that we've been talking about, I put that up in bold for a particular reason. The social responsibility of social responsibility is not something limited only to universities. All public institutions and even private institutions have it, or should have it. The question is, how is it different for an educational institution? How is it different for a particular type of educational institution, which is the university? And there I would say, for example, other educational institutions might have it differently. When I think of social responsibility of the university, this is what it looks like to me. Let me expand that picture just for a minute to say what it means. It seems to me, in sifting the conversations yesterday and today, that there are at least 4 types of things that we have been talking about, I think all of which make up this thing called social responsibility of the university. The first is really a point I should thank the rector of Istanbul University for raising yesterday. The idea of the university is social responsibility itself. The university as a concept is a social contract. And this is true for all, private or otherwise. They get tax breaks, they get land, they get special laws, they get all sorts of things as a contract with society to serve a certain social purpose. And part of me thinks that maybe this new interest in social responsibility is coming from the fact that many of us see that contract not being fulfilled, maybe in that pull towards vocationalism. And therefore, the reaction is, hey guys, wait, remember that bit? You have special treatment because you had made special promises to society. And I think that must also not be forgotten by the proponents of social responsibility, because sometimes we talk of it as if it is something separate from, additional to, new to the real purpose of the university. There's the real purpose of the university, and then there is social responsibility. And that, I think, is a folly and a trap we shouldn't fall into. The second is the role of the university as a role model, and the moderator today actually mentioned this yesterday, and our efforts, which I'll come to in a minute, have been very much in this mode. The part of the university's responsibility is to reflect the society it is in, but as better than the reality of that society. If the society is turning green, the university must turn greener, because it has a role as a role model to the rest of society. And that, I think, is a second font of social responsibility. A third font that we've been seeing again and again is the university as a direct change agent. University, through its activities, whether institutional or curricular, doing things that tries to change actively, society, whether it is teaching kids, whether it is service learning, all sorts of things. And the fourth font of social responsibility that I thought came out, not as much, but I think is equally important, given the mission of the university as an institution, is the university as a producer of social change agents. Ultimately, the biggest social change that universities can bring is through the work of the students after they are no longer students. And that is where the curricular comes back. It is not simply what do the students or faculty or the university do when the students are there. The biggest footprint may be that which the students leave after they are no longer students, and how the university has trained them to fulfill that responsibility. In that sense, I think this broader notion, the first, and I've uncluttered the picture, is the challenge is linkage with society. In the second, the challenge is linkage with market, and by market I don't mean just the economic market, but other institutions and how they follow you as a role model. The third, the challenges are very often curricular, and again in the broadest sense, faculty and students. And the fourth, the challenges are how well or not we have trained our students, not just some who have gone on to do something, but as a group, to fulfill that social responsibility in how we have imparted the education. I will not go too much into the university. As I said, we are a very small university. We are 26 years old. We were started in a rented house. We are a private university, non-profit, started in a rented house with 35 students and 7 faculty. We are now 3,500 students, 200 faculty. Again, fairly small, but interesting in that we are a little petri dish. That's the campus. There's one gate in, one gate out, and that makes it rather interesting as a petri dish. During the day, 5,000 people work there. During the night, 2,500 sleep there, including myself. I live on campus. And what that means is it's that test bed for all sorts of things that can be done with the students, with the faculty, with the staff. We have 3 schools, originally a school of business, a school of humanities and social sciences, a school of science and engineering, and have recently announced that by the end of this year, we'll have the 4th, which is a school of law. This university started as a business school from a very clear proposition. A bunch of entrepreneurs, very, very far-reaching, visionary business leaders, thought we didn't have good business graduates in the country. So they set up a school of graduate school of business for MBS. Very clear cause. It has since grown into a full university, but from day one, there was a large social commitment to national need. And what that has meant, and this is really what's in my title, as a private university, no support from the government per se, the strong social commitment has resulted in the fact that 40% of our students are on financial aid, 10% of our students are on a particular program which is below the poverty line, and a very strong commitment to creating that diversity, economic, social, educational, that is to be found in very few places in a country like Pakistan, but I will not go into that. Let me tell you the story of one particular. Actually, before that, maybe this one slide. Around 4 years ago, there was a major flood in Pakistan that you would have all heard of. And this is, in some ways, what propelled the university into much more social responsibility work in very interesting ways, because it wasn't the faculty, it wasn't the staff, it wasn't the university, it was the students. That yellow line, by the way, is if you take the flood on a map of Pakistan, that would be the area covered by it. Superimpose it on a map of the US, it covers from up in Vermont to down in Florida. Put the same area of the flood on a map of Japan, it'll cover the entire country. Put the same on a map of Europe, it'll cover an area from Denmark to Spain. I sort of just put that up to give you a sense of the enormity of this event. And it was a climatic event, maybe not climate change, but certainly climatic. B, it affected just about everyone in Pakistan. And the reason I put up this story is it forced the university, which was very focused on excellence in education. The students forced it to meet its community and redefine its community in much more profound ways than it had ever done before. And this is because the students came from everywhere and they saw their communities impacted and led the university sometimes violently, not violently, but sometimes very enthusiastically, into the type of actions, both curricular and co-curricular, that the university wasn't taking at that point. And I put this example simply to suggest that students as agents of university change must never be underestimated. In fact, they should be cultivated and utilized. I want to end by giving you 5 lessons that we've learned from a program that I initiated called the Sarsabs Lumps. Sarsabs means evergreen. We've been a green campus. We are very proud of our greenness. And Sarsabs was an initiative launched about 2 years ago where we said we must do first ourselves what we are asking the rest of the country to do in terms of sustainability. And I want to share these 5 lessons that have come from this initiative in both about sustainability and about universities and about bringing about change. The stories are small. I think the lessons are not. The first of the lesson that I would like to put up is that ownership matters. Ownership matters in all the ways that my colleagues have talked about it, and ownership matters essentially in ways that you have to create institutional fora, institutional mechanisms to give away the ownership to multiple constituencies. And that is not easy because those constituencies may not want to take the ownership. So for example, simply saying we will ask the Student Society for Environment to do this does not mean that they will be enthusiastic about it. You first have to have not leadership, but listenership in trying to figure out what they want to own. And we saw this again and again, and the way we sort of did this was we set up a President's Council, which had student as well as staff representation from key departments, many of whom actually were not very enthusiastic about getting one more set of responsibilities on them. And that whole process of having the institutional forum was an extremely, extremely important one in ways that my colleagues have already talked about. Lesson 2 is institutional design matters. And I'll tell you a very small story, but it's really my favorite story. Institutional design really, really matters. And this started by one of the faculty members who'd been there much longer than me, pointing this out to me, and then my one day walking on campus and finding a set of somewhat rusting bikes. And I said, what's the story of these things? And it turned out that these had been a gift from one of the board members to encourage people to bicycle. Bicycling in Pakistan, as in many countries in that region, is not really seen as a recreational thing. It's a very small thing. And I said, so what happened? They said, well, the year they gave it, it worked. They put it in the boys' hostel so that they could come to the classes. The assumption, of course, was boys bike and girls don't. And then that group of students went away, no leadership, and it fizzled away. So we thought, okay, pick up the bikes, get some new one, put them at a different place at the front gate. The university is slightly off town, and this allows people to use it outside and inside. And just let anyone pick up a bike and take it anywhere. All you need to do is to give your university pass. And the first question I got was, but what if the bike gets broken? I said, well, they're rusting right now, so if they get broken, they get broken. If they don't come back, they don't come back. The interesting thing was, within a week, we actually had a list of cell phones at the gate of people who were waiting to get their hands on the bikes. We'd put about 50 or 60, and they weren't, not 50 or 60, 12 or 13 at that point, and they weren't finding them enough. The other interesting thing was, you suddenly had girls on campus biking, and many of them learning to bike for the first time because, again, it's not seen as a recreational, and mostly there wouldn't be spaces that would have the privacy or the facility to do that. The third interesting thing was the most interesting. We are situated in a somewhat affluent neighborhood, and suddenly you found more people in the neighborhood biking, some of them wanting to come to campus to bike. So a very small initiative, but the idea of just thinking through who will use it and how changes that in particular ways. The third of my lessons here, and I've only got 5, so I'll wrap this fairly quickly, is incentives matter. Incentives matter a lot. I don't need to tell this crowd about it, but in particular, we started, you have to have a reason to believe, which is more than just sustainability is good and environment is good. And one of the earliest programs we launched was that we would turn the library building, which is the largest energy consumer and the most traffic-intensive building on campus, into a more energy-conserving LED lights and so on and so forth. And this was a big deal because on our budget, the second largest line after payroll is energy. Pakistan is in the middle of a major energy crisis. Difficult to understand that here in Saudi Arabia, but if you're in Pakistan with 12 hours of load shedding, this is a big deal. And I thought, okay, so who are the constituencies of change here that you have to win over? Anyone, I won't go through because I don't have Eric's wonderful clicker here, but I would have loved to do that by trying to have you think who you think would have resisted this idea the most. I thought the resistance might come from the board because we were going to ask for money. The board gave their approval partly in a jiffy, partly because I'd just come in, so I was still in the honeymoon period, and you get 1 or 2 wishes in that period. Second, because if you give a 14-month payback promise, that sounds real good. We did give them payback actually in 9 months, which was good, but the resistance actually came from the librarian and the library staff, because they thought the light shade is not right. And eventually it took me saying, I'll have them first put in my office. And anyone who walks in, I'll show them what an LED light looks like. But it got implemented. It got, as I said, instead of the 15-month payback we had calculated, we had a 9-month payback on the project. The interesting thing is, at this point, as part of all the energy conservation efforts, we are saving 2 million rupees a month. Now, that wouldn't mean anything to you, except it means 15% of our monthly energy cost. That's fairly huge, whatever currency you think about it. And partly it was just the low-hanging fruit of things we were doing wrong, but the incentives matter. Once you can win that over, you can then start thinking about much more bold things. And one of those bold things that came with the help of a board, and people haven't mentioned boards at all this meeting. In many universities such as mine, they become very important to such change. But this came, therefore, as a donation from the board to put up solar panels to run the library on. We won't get a good payback on this, and we've turned it into an educational. It was put up with the students, it was put up with the faculty, and the management of it is not only with the facilities department, but with the electrical engineering department as a teaching tool, in addition to an actual operational tool, because the most energy-intensive building runs on it. Lesson number 4 is targets matter. And certainly for small universities in developing countries, this was a lesson I wouldn't have predicted, but has become one of the most important. During my time at BU, I'd become familiar with something called STARS. STARS is a nonprofit called Sustainability Tracking and Assessment Rating System. It's for sustainability assessment of universities. Because I was still on the BU list when I'd come back, they sent something about what they were doing, which also came to me, and we wrote back, and we were told STARS is only for US North American universities, doesn't operate in developing countries. They did have a pilot program they were launching where you could sort of say you were a friend of STARS, but you wouldn't actually be rated. We said, okay, we're going to become the first South Asian university to do that, but give us all your metrics and we will follow them voluntarily. We will do all the things that are supposed to be done. We'll do it voluntarily. All we need is your framework. But the fact that you had the framework and didn't have to go through the whole dispute of what to do and what not to do, how to count and how not to count, became a major thing. We have recently, just last week, announced that this graduation, all the students who will graduate will have a chance to take what's called the GPA, the Graduation Pledge Alliances, pledge on social responsibility and environment. At one level, these are very small things. At another level, if you are the leading university in a country, and without being arrogant, we kind of are, in both these cases, other universities immediately jumped on it, because the sort of leader was kind of doing it. The 5th and last lesson that I would like to share with you here relates to leadership. And this has been talked about a lot, but leadership comes again in multiple forms, and leadership needs to be seen in multiple forms. And that means leadership from the faculty. And one of the things, we don't have an environmental studies program. We don't intend to create one at this point. We are trying to embed it within all our existing departments. And one of the things, and it turned out to be a great event, we got people in various disciplines, along with myself, to do this showcase set of events on what they were doing on the environment. So this was history professors, Islamic studies professors, physics, chemistry, anthropology, all dealing with the environment in various ways, and that again created the sense that this is something bigger than what just a department does. Student involvement, again, I've already mentioned, but one of the things I'll mention is that saving on electricity that I mentioned, half of it came from a student paper. A student wrote a paper in the business management school on how we could change some of our tracking, and that changed. And finally, as I said, and I haven't mentioned this, the role of the board cannot ever be underestimated and should always be kept in mind. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Adil, for this outstanding presentation, extremely interesting technology-wise as well. The disadvantage was that because you must have made some interesting changes for the benefit of all of us, it could not be translated, and we could not see it here. That's why you saw us shifting over there. But I think your 5 lessons at the end are quite remarkable, and all those who are in leadership position or in management positions at higher education institutions, I think they're very, very strong messages. The thing that matters in running an institution, ownership, institutional design, incentives, targets, and leadership. I think it's very clear message, very important messages. Thank you very much. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got how much time now? We're supposed to finish at 14:50. We've got quite a bit of time. We've got quite a bit of time for questions and answers. So we've had some extremely interesting presentations, and here's an opportunity for you to question and get more clarification from our distinguished speakers. Let's see, I see number 1 there. May I ask you please, even if you've already introduced yourself in the past, and I know you have, I've seen your hand up several times, please do introduce yourself again and be very short in your question. Okay. Thank you.
Mohammed Ziad Krumli, King Saud University, College of Engineering, Civil Engineering Department. My question to the Executive Vice President of Ohio State University, which I adore. My brother was studying there while I am studying in University of Toronto during 1987 to 1991. Did Ohio State University become sustainable green campus before Columbus City, or did Columbus City become green city and sustainable city, or did they start together and sometimes, I don't know. Thank you for answering this question. And how can we, Riyadh City and the universities in Riyadh, always you said you want the university to start first. In my opinion, both must start together. Thank you.
Well, I think the last comment you made is the correct comment. That is, the university in and of itself, a university is not going to change its environment unless that environment is in point of fact ready to change, because the faculty and the students are going to focus on those 3 dimensions of research, teaching, and then ultimately engagement. But the community itself has to be willing to then take that information, use it, and also help in the process. It's an interactive process. So the city of Columbus, for example, that has helped us dramatically in terms of creating a more sustainable transportation environment for the university, had to be ready to accept those ideas that were coming forward from faculty, and we had to listen to them, because we made requests of the city that we thought were important from a research perspective that they didn't think were viable, and we had to then engage in that conversation. So it's not a matter of a university imposing itself on the environment. It's also not a matter of the environment imposing itself on the university. This must be a partnership. And in a partnership, that means that both parties have to have clear ideas and clear benefits. The main difficulty is always trying to understand the perspective of your partner. So we would, for example, we're in the process now of moving some roadways on campus because it will make it more efficient for us to distribute the goods we need to sustain operations. Some of those roads are on city property, and so we've been in negotiations with the city to help with the cost of that activity. And we ran into a great deal of resistance and couldn't really determine why that was the case. It took us a while to understand that one of the problems we were having is that a particular city councilman had some constituents in that area who were really in opposition to that move. So it wasn't the councilman. The real issue was to convince those citizens that this was really in their best interest as well. So no matter how much we might have fought with that councilman, unless we understood that perspective, it never would have been effective. And so it's this constant effort to understand each other and always assume that you really don't understand. And so you keep asking questions. Just as they keep asking questions, our faculty come up with some really interesting ideas. Some of them are totally unpractical. And so they have no hesitancy questioning what we're trying to do, why we're doing it. And it's a continuous dialogue that must go on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joseph. I think we had a question there.
For us in the kingdom lately, the huge wave of calls for improvement and change in all sectors to keep up with the concept of globalization has reached to a stage that sustainability of many institutional strategies and academic, operational, and reputational mechanisms are in question. It's getting either sustainability or stability. However, on the other hand, the urge for change emerged in evolution of creativity and innovation in the outcomes. Many students, faculties, and even the society are really seeing that within the kingdom and even abroad. So the question that is really presenting itself now, to what extent the structure and policies of sustainability, especially in the social responsibility of the universities, should and can be embedded in the university's strategic plans to enhance all three: value, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Thank you. Dr. Aziz Rajab, again, Northern University, Vice Dean of Medical College.
Thank you. In fact, it can be answered by all of you. Who wants to take it up? Yes, please, Antonio.
At our university, we have an advantage regarding the question because every single student in the undergraduate program has to do social service work. And what we do, we embed that into the curriculum, and all the programs are really made so that we can have the social programs embedded for the students, and in some cases, many of the projects of the courses are by requirement and law doing that. But certainly enough is that many of our students do much more of the requirement at the end, and we put that as a part of our vision in terms of that even in our high schools and in postgraduate work, we really have many students that do a lot of social work, and they do innovation in their particular projects in the courses, so it really it's an integral part of our curriculum. We're not there yet, but we're working very hard to put in more and more in the curriculum.
Zul, you want to say
Can I share the experience that we had? In our university, I think social engagement is a compulsory 3-year program. Anybody who is enrolled in the university will have to do a 3-year compulsory community engagement program based on the competency framework that I mentioned to you. One of the core values of the university is passion for service. And the students will have to choose a project that is related to a particular community, a site in the community, and they have to work in a group of 10, preferably across nations, so that they can learn not only about the community locally, but also about their community at home. For example, one project, when we engage the students, a student from Guinea says, this will not work in my community because you lack A, B, C, D. And therefore, there is a room for students to add on to make this project real as far as they are concerned. And not only that, I think this project will, at the end of the day, will qualify them. They have no credits for this. When they do the 3-year programs, they have no credits, no 8 credits, 9 credits, no. It is because of the passion. And this is where I think the elements of the heart that I was talking to you about, the reawakening of their responsibility as a student to serve the community. How do you do that? But at the end of the day, when they graduate, they will have another certificate. Apart from the academic scroll, they will have another scroll, what we call the competency scroll, where we actually enlist what are the competencies they have achieved, and this will be a value add to their graduation certificate, as it were.
Joseph?
If I can address that question a slightly different way, I tend to think of the issues you've raised really at the institutional level. The reality is that change is with us, change is going to continue, societies will evolve over time, as will expectations, and that institutions themselves have to be thinking constantly about how they are going to both adapt to, that is react to, but also affect that change. So from an institutional level, it means that there must be some commitment to and also some freedom to involve in the strategic planning that allows an institution to position itself, whether in our case we're talking about universities. And so we go through a fairly elaborate strategic planning process every 5 years in which we reconsider the focus that we have, when we reconsider whether or not that's still consistent given what is occurring in society and given where knowledge is going. Because one of the interesting parts about being at a university, and you've heard that in different ways, is we don't know what the future is going to be. We're the change agent determining what will happen in society, and at the same time we're adapting to it so that society can be much more effective. So there has to be this level, I think, of constant reassessment of where an institution is, whether it's a university or a governmental agency or anything else, and then the appropriate adjustments being made, because change is just a constant.
You want to say anything, Adil?
Yes, very briefly, stability in a dynamic system requires change. If you stay static in a dynamic system, you are not stable in that sense, because everything, as was mentioned, around you is changing. The only thing I'll add to what Joe just said is, it's not simply that it is that we are responding to the change that is around us, but as universities, we also have a responsibility to push those around us to change. And that's where sort of this prime mover, because that's central to the purpose of the university. And therefore, it's A, responding to whatever is happening around you, B, part of the university's responsibility is to change that which is around us, and hopefully for the better.
Good. Yes, yes, please.
Hello. Rubai Al-Sabhan, lecturer at University of Hail. My question for all the presenters, how the social efforts done by the universities are measured? How could we say if this university is doing what they ask to do when it comes for social responsibility, and how would you say for yourself if you are doing what you ask to do or not? My second question for Dr. Adil, I would like to ask him how did they deal with the solar power variation? We know the solar is not always at the sky. How did you do with this problem? Thank you.
Okay, maybe Adil, you answer the specific question, and then we turn to the first part of the questions to everybody.
Sure. That's a very perceptive question. Solar is, and again, sort of part of my work is related to environment and energy. Solar is not the easiest one to go into at a big level, especially in a country like Pakistan. The economics are not as good as in some of the other things. But as I mentioned, partly if you have the momentum of change coming from elsewhere, much of our savings actually come from LED. But if you have that story right, then you can actually push for other places too. In the solar case, I think the link to a major donor, also a board member, who was passionate about it and who had seen the other activities and got excited about this, that helped because it allowed us the capital. More than that, linking it to the educational purpose, especially for our new engineering school, created a momentum and a constituency that might not have happened if it was simply another infrastructure project within facilities. So that's the linking to the curricular purpose that was very important.
Right, you want to answer the first part of the questions? How do you measure the social responsibility efforts undertaken by the institutions? Is there any form of measurement that you carry out?
Can I try this? I've got a different idea. Basically, I don't think everything should be measurable. I mean, when we talk about responsibility, often I think it is a duty to do, and it is not, quote unquote, to be measured. In other words, if I'm not measured, I'm not going to do it. I think this is a kind of signal that at least we are worried in the university, that you do it because it is measured. If it's not measured, then it's okay, I will not do it. If I do it, I will do it, just by and by, because it's not important to me. So I think the self-reawakening is what we wanted to bring to the students. How much can they give back to the community once they've gained so much from the community, as a kind of a responsibility, a duty for them to do it. But I think that's very ideal, perhaps. The kind of measure that we do, it is not a reductionist measure. In other words, we don't give you A, B, C, D. We see at how much you can accomplish. In other words, in our case, when after the 3 years, they're supposed to graduate a community, just like you graduate a business. In other words, there is already an outcome of this community. For example, if you talk about microcredit, how much of the level of poverty you can sort of, change as far as that's concerned. So to graduate that whole community is we look at it as a total perspective rather than, A, B, C, D. And that's the kind of measure that, quote unquote, we are looking at. And it's the whole team will get the kind of reward, incentive, recognition, or whatever you want to call it. It's not on individual. So we still keep the teamwork intact. We keep the kind of social obligation among them intact, and also the partnership with the university intact, rather than trying to grade them the way we grade academic work.
Okay, anyone? Yes, Antonio?
Yeah, I think there can be two types of measures that we can use. And just to give you some examples, we do measure what progress we are making. It can be one internal, like for our students, how well are they doing, and what we're doing right now with all this changing in accreditation of assessment, we're trying to build it into the outcome assessment of the students in a certain point in their degree. But the other one is the community assessment. And to give you an example, one of the projects that I mentioned, Technical High School, what is it giving to the community locally? We have about 600, 700 students there that are at least making a technical high school. What will they be doing if we didn't have that opportunity for them? And that's part of the assessment with that local community, and also the engagement with the local authorities, the entrepreneurial authorities, or the industry in the region, which now every municipality in the metro area of our city wants to build one of that technical high school. So those types of measurements, but it is very important to measure the impact on the community.
Yes, I think there's a complication in the sense that you have to define the purpose of the institution. One of the points I tried to make was that it's really important to align whatever social involvement that's important to you with the institutional mission. You cannot do everything. And a university cannot be thought of as a solution to all of society's problems. Instead, there are different universities with different purposes. And those institutions then need to look for areas in which social responsibility aligns effectively with their purpose. It's that connection, that reinforcing that takes place between those two that really determines the ultimate effectiveness. As a public institution, as a state institution, we're asked to do everything by everyone. And the most difficult thing we do, the most disciplined thing we have to do at times, is to say, no, we cannot do that. That is not consistent with our individual goals. And then try to help those individuals find a different solution with a different institution. So it's not a matter of turning your back, it's a matter of simply saying that alignment, that consistency is just absolutely essential for the success of that social activity that's critical, that societal activity that's critical, but also the purpose of the university.
Yes, Ariel? Very briefly on that, if I can take it to a related, I think, part of your question. I'm in the group that thinks that we should not have new measures of social responsibility. Read my lips, no new measures. What we need is to put social responsibility into the measures that we already have, teaching, research, service. Now that's not easy, but the linear mechanism is you measure so that you can reward, so that you can celebrate. You can turn it on its head and start by looking at what universities celebrate. What do the presidents celebrate? What does the community celebrate about a university? Once they start celebrating those who do social responsibility, it will seep into the measures itself. In the existing metrics, I don't think we need to create new ones.
Okay, we have a question at the back there, I think.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to ask about when together to be one to be in one responsibility to just a minute. I want to talk again.
Okay.
I want to ask when together all the university in one commit to stop in the face of the climate change.
Did you?
What is the responsibility about this?
You mean what is the responsibility of universities
yes, we want
towards
to be
climate
together,
change?
all the university of the world. How to be together in the face of the
climate change. Okay, not an easy one, but let's see what our panel comes up with. How do universities of the world unite to counteract climate change? Climate change. Climate change.
First of all, unfortunately, all the universities of the world are not going to unite on climate change, just as all nations are having difficulty uniting on climate change. But universities have a role to play. Universities have a role to play in trying to understand what the dynamics of climate change really are. And that really means a great deal of scientific research and then research on the impact of changing climate. That's knowledge generation, and that universities must do, and they do share that information. There are major national and international conferences focused on just the understanding of the climate change issue. Universities then have to understand the impact that that has on society and what are the possible solutions to climate change that's occurring on a worldwide basis. That's all part of the research mission. There's also a teaching mission, which is how do we in effect get our students to understand what those are, not just to have our faculty do research, but then how do you put that information in a form that allows students to work with students elsewhere in the world and to develop a focus on climate change that's very important. And then the last mission of the university is ultimately to help problem solve. All right, so let's assume there's nothing that can be done to stop the current state of climate change. How do we adjust to it? How do we adapt to it? What are the solutions to those problems, all the way from technical solutions to social solutions? That occurs through a lot of exchange of information, but once the information is exchanged, you ultimately get to the issue of dealing with the political structure that exists around the world. It's not all in the hands of universities.
Yes, Ariel?
Very briefly, I think this is a moment to celebrate what universities have already done. Amongst the institutions of society, I would argue universities have already done an amazing lot on climate change. Who put the issue on the agenda? Academia did. Who started raising the concern? Students and academia did. Who started identifying possible actions? Nearly the bulk of them came from research at universities. So it came from research, it came from teaching. Who created a generation that is much more aware and active about this issue so that these questions are being asked? So the universities have already been a fermenting ground, especially on this issue, but also on a whole range of other issues. And we should also celebrate that as part of what universities do. They are canaries in the mine, they are early problem identifiers, they are solution identifiers. The last one, and this is the one that I think all of us have been also talking about, is I think universities owe it to their society to be doing more on climate change. It's not our job to save the world, but every university has to be better on climate change than every other neighbor it has, because of the privileged position and the test bed it has. And I think most universities are trying to do that I will do better than the rest of Lahore. You will do better than the rest of Mountairy. And if that starts happening, it adds up pretty quick.
If I may try and answer your question a little bit, I belong to a region, Southern Africa, which has an association of universities in Southern Africa, not South Africa, Southern Africa. It's called SARUA, Southern African Regional Universities Association, which covers about 16 countries and 90 universities. About 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, it decided that climate change is the association decided that climate change is a very important topic for the region, and it has to do something about it. And it convened a couple of workshops, and the first strategy was, what is happening at the moment? Which universities are doing what? What's expertise available in climate change? And it grouped people together, and it was remarkable how much work was going on, individually, within institution, sometimes within the department without the institution really being aware of it. So I think that could be a strategy of going through associations of universities, making it as an agenda, grouping institutions together, and now they've created several committees which look at specific aspects of climate change to push the agenda forward and to link up with institutions all over the world working on it. And they were already linked up, because climate change is a topic where you can't work entirely on your own. You have to link up with other institutions. And I think it's turned out to be very effective. So that could be a way out. Right, yes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is Dr. Hani Said from King Abdulaziz University. I would like, first of all, to thank all the speakers for this, to handling this very important issues and this very important topic, which I wasn't so familiar with. Back to the first lecture of Dr. الكيفلي, and he defines the terms sustainability, which is, I think it is not very clear for everybody in the university, for students and faculties. And from the lecture that I can learn that the sustainability can go to many fields, like the green issues or environmentally friendly social service, and maybe also ethical service or ethical field for the student or the faculties. I would like to ask from the people that to evaluate ourselves. Do you have any list of questionnaires that if we ask ourselves, so we will know where to stand in terms of sustainability? Because I am sure all of our university in the kingdom and other university has many efforts, or have many efforts in many fields and many projects to handle many things, but it is not all under the term of sustainability. Maybe under the term of other things and under the term of other goals. Thank you.
You want to define, Zul, what you mean by sustainability?
Well, like I say, as far as we can see, sustainability is a way of life. In other words, you cannot do sustainability as a kind of a curriculum from 5 to 9, and after that you stop. It is something that is continuous. It is about changing of habits. It's about changing of mindsets. I mean, if I look at the way we live today, it is quote-unquote unsustainable. And therefore, unless and until we start to go into a long-term change, then we will not get into sustainability. This is where my passion is to go back and look at how generations before us have tried to manage sustainability. There is, I think, in the process of development, we have neglected this whole idea of what sustainability is all about and start to engage into something which is now unsustainable. If that's the kind of idea that we've got, and I think this whole effort in trying to put in sustainability back is about experimenting and showing that it is actually can be done. In my university, like I say, we started with the students, at least my previous university. We started with the students because the students are the ones that are more sensitive to issues of sustainability. The lecturers, the professors, they are there, they are not, they are not affected by sustainability as such because they make their mark. I'm a professor in pharmacology, so what is sustainability? And I'm not going to start from zero again. So the students are the ones that we actually encourage them to be aware of what sustainability is about. And we encourage them in a way that if there is a problem in the university, you write to the university and tell the university how you want to solve this problem. And we give them at least 5 guidelines. One is this problem solving needs to be done voluntarily. There's no rewards for this, because it's part and parcel of your duty to maintain the university. Second, we say it has to be research-based. In other words, you need to find out why the problem exists. And third, we say you need to do this in a kind of a teamwork. You need to enroll other students and other departments to solve that particular problem, because you alone may not be able to solve it. And third, we say you use what we call insourcing. In other words, use the expertise within the university to find out how to solve this, because there are a lot of expertise in the university that is not be untapped. We always talk about outsourcing. We are saying here, you do insourcing. In other words, use what is available in the university. And last point, you say you document it and you submit to the university and say, this is a problem and this is how it's going to be solved. When that framework is done, we find at least initially there's about 60 projects being submitted to the university in trying to solve the problem of the university. Some of them related to sustainability, some do not. But at least there is already a thinking process that the students are taking ownership in trying to solve the problem of the university. Once it's related to the university, we then finance it. So this is the kind of experimentation we do. We do it the other way around. We do not start with lectures. Starting with lectures and having examination at the end of the day, they may get an A, but they still do not know what sustainability is all about because they have not done it, they have not practiced it. So we have inverted the process, learning by doing, and then we go to the lectures and use those as case studies and say, this is how sustainability ought to be done. And once the student is aware, then the students will go up to the professor and say, in this particular lecture, where is the sustainability element? And the lecturer and the professor needs now to think about this because it's come out of the student asking those questions. So it is how actually you run it depending on the kind of circumstances that you are in. I'm not too sure whether I've answered your question.
I think you've raised a very important question that very often universities don't understand what is sustainable development is all about. And even more importantly, many of them do a lot of activities related to sustainable development without realizing that they're doing it. And I think your idea of a questionnaire was a very interesting one. A couple of years ago, 3 associations came together to run a questionnaire for determining what sustainable development activities is taking place in African universities all over Africa. The report has been published, the questionnaire is available. If you can talk after the lecture, I can give you some hint as to where to find it, and maybe that could be useful to you. Right, there was a question there, yes.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. محمد شبراق من جامعة sorry, I will speak in English. Mohammed Shobrak from Taif University. I'm the Vice Dean of the Academic Research. Also, I'm a member of the Global Council of BirdLife International, which is an organization supporting the birds and biodiversity around the world. And it has 92 organizations around the world. My question from several, seeing from the session that is being done, most of the speakers did not mention working with the international or NGOs, which is also have some work related to the social responsibility, and most of their work is actually their work as a social responsibility. We've seen in some international universities, they have societies inside their student societies, and I think that there is a chance for university to cooperate with NGOs in the countries, which will support, will give also kind of a place for social responsibility. Okay. Another issue is develop the student societies. I think it will again support dealing with the situation inside the country. Also, I believe that, and I need your opinion in this. Some societies started in universities, which is research societies. I think this society can play a role in also in the social responsibility and could be measuring their work could be measured, you know, if dealing with medical, you know, go to international to support.
Can you please be brief?
Yes.
We have to end now.
I think I end my
Yes.
my thing. Thank you.
Okay, so basically what's the role of NGOs in linkages with universities and the various societies, students and research societies within university? A brief reaction if you have any. We've run out of time. I cannot take any more questions. A very brief comment if any of you wants to make it.
Well, we have close relationship with many NGOs, locally, national, and internationally. And we work very closely with them as long as it is within our strategic plan and our strategic projects. Regarding students, we probably have many of our student groups working in the particular projects, either as their curriculum or as part of the activities of the student groups.
Any other reactions? No? Yeah?
I want to come back to what Rajesh said this morning. These are the practitioners. Most of the time they have got the solution because they've been in the field longer than we have been. So they are really a useful resources for us, not because of anything, but because they've been practicing it for a long time.
This is NGOs?
NGOs,
yeah. Okay, I'm afraid I'm sorry, I can't take any more questions. We've already reached the time limit. And I've got to end this particular session, and in doing so, let me first of all thank you all for being present and for answering questions to make this a really very, very interesting session. In particular, thank our 4 speakers for outstanding presentations, really. I think they were really very, very good presentations of examples of how institutions deal with the issues of sustainable development. And thank you to our monitoring of questions. You people did a wonderful job. I realize now that without you it becomes extremely difficult. You did a very wonderful job, these 4 or 5 people who are around. Thank you all very much. Let me remind you, we have a coffee break right now, and we come back for the next session at 3:20. At 3:20 for the talk show, which is going to be moderated by Philip Oldbach. Should be very interesting, so be back here please at 3:20 after the coffee break. Thank you all very much.